No, it was just conversational like this.
And did he say anything to you and Officer Smith about how he had expected the police to treat him?
Once we got back to the homicide offices, homicide detective offices, we took him upstairs to a restroom, let him wash his face, get that pepper spray out as best we could. He mentioned that he was surprised that we were treating him nicely. I think he said he expected us to beat him or kick his ass, I think was the phrase he used. But he thanked us.
When he was talking about the truck, did he volunteer that information, or was that in response to a question?
I think I asked him how he'd gotten there, and he mentioned that he'd had a truck.
Right. Did he say anything else to you about what had happened that day that you can recall? Did he talk about a journal?
Yes, he did mention that there, when he brought up the truck, he mentioned that there was a journal in the truck that contained information about his plans for the shooting.
Anything else?
I can't recall anything at the moment.
What did you do when you got to the homicide office?
We let him wash off his face, and then we escorted him just down the hall to a room where the detectives would, where he would be interviewed by the detectives. So we put him in the room and turned him over to the detectives there.
I could have just a moment. No further questions, thank you.
Cross-examination.
Just a few. Detective Abed, you're a detective now, but you were or were not at the time of the shooting?
I was a patrol officer at the time of the shooting.
So you were not the detective that did the investigation on this case?
No, I was not.
So your interactions on this case were limited to what you've testified to today?
Yes.
Okay. So I just want to go over a couple of things. You said that Mr. Ybarra had told you that he had gotten angry over some things.
Yes.
Did he tell you what he had gotten angry over?
He mentioned over time that he'd been in therapy. He didn't think that had worked, and just that he just felt that way more and more.
He didn't tell you about his bed?
His bed?
Yeah. He didn't tell you about his bed?
I don't recall anything about a bed.
Okay. But he did tell you he was in therapy.
I think he mentioned that. Yeah.
Did he tell you that he had psychosis?
I think he may have mentioned that too. I don't recall that specifically, but that sounds the gist of what he was talking about. Yeah.
And you wrote a report about this, right?
I wrote my statement.
Yes. You didn't write in your statement about him telling you he was in therapy?
You know, there are so many things that happened that day. I don't think I could have possibly put down every single thing that happened on paper.
Did you write down that he told you he was in therapy?
I did not.
Did you write down that he told you he had psychosis?
I didn't recall that.
So when you were talking with him, you said that you were talking with him in the manner that you were talking with the prosecutor.
I'm sorry, repeat that?
When you were talking with him, you just testified that you talked to him in the same manner that you were talking with the prosecutor.
Yes.
Conversational tone.
Yes.
Didn't seem angry.
No.
When he was talking with you and Officer Smith in the car, could you tell that he was affected by the pepper spray?
He had some watering to the eyes, and he'd sit with his eyes closed.
And he had some trouble trying to cough it out a little bit, too?
I don't recall it specifically, but he might have. That's a common...
Have you watched the video of him in your car?
Bits of it, yes, not the
Did
entire.
you see him when he was coughing in your car?
I don't recall him coughing, but I would not be surprised if he had.
Right. Could you smell the pepper spray?
Yes.
Were you affected by the pepper spray?
No.
Mr. Ybarra was answering your questions quite openly, was he not?
Yes.
He told you where to find his truck.
Yes.
He told you that he wrote a journal.
Yes.
He told you where to find the journal.
He said it was in the truck.
And he told you that he had written about the plans for the shooting in the journal.
Yes.
He wasn't trying to hide where his truck was,
No.
and in fact it was right across the street from the building, was it not?
That's my understanding.
Didn't wear didn't find him with a mask on?
No.
Didn't find him with any gloves on his hands?
No.
It didn't appear he made any attempt whatsoever to hide his identity, did it?
No, he did not.
One more thing I want to ask you about. Do you recall him telling you on that car ride that he didn't know whether what had happened was a dream or whether it was real?
That I do not recall.
Thank
It's
you.
fine.
No more questions.
Thank you.
Steve?
Officer, did the defendant appear to have any trouble understanding what you were saying to him or answering in a coherent way?
No.
Did he appear to be responding to voices of any kind or having auditory hallucinations of any kind?
Just my voice.
Thank you, nothing else.
Anything else from the defense? All right, thank you. Next witness.
State calls Officer Micah Smith.
Mr. Smith, if you raise your right hand, you swear or affirm to tell the truth?
I do.
Excuse me.
Could you tell us your name and spell your first and last name, please?
My name is Micah Smith. First name is Micah, M-I-C-A-H. Last name Smith, S-M-I-T-H.
And what is your occupation?
Police officer.
How long have you been a police officer?
Approximately 17 years.
Okay. Do you work for SPD currently?
Currently I do, yes.
And were you with SPD all those 17 years?
No, I was not.
What sort of background do you have in law enforcement?
I started in October 1999 with the Arapahoe County Sheriff's Office. I did that for approximately just over 3 years. Then I became a federal agent with the Air Force Office of Special Investigations. I did that for just over 3 years. Then I was a police officer for Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department in Charlotte, North Carolina for just over 7 years. And then I came here to Seattle.
Okay. And what are your duties currently?
I'm a patrol officer for the North Precinct. I work first shift.
And does the North Precinct cover the area of Seattle Pacific University?
No, it does not.
At the time that the shooting happened in 2014, where were you assigned?
I was assigned to the West Precinct. I was on my field training officer portion of, so I was assigned there for approximately a month.
Okay,
for
so
training.
you were in training with Officer Abed?
Yes.
Okay. Did you respond with Officer Abed to the call to SPU at the time of the shooting on June 5th, 2014?
Yes.
What did you see when you arrived?
When we first pulled up to the left of where we parked, I could see an injured person lying on the ground with several people around it. I thought one was either a medic or a police officer, just based on the uniform.
Okay. Now, does your patrol car have dash cam video?
Yes.
And is that video that looks out over the hood of the car?
Yes, it looks out the front of the vehicle.
And does it turn on every time you turn the car on?
It continuously runs, but it only records when we tell it to record, when we hit the record button, or when the lights and siren.
Okay. On this day, had you told it to record?
Yes.
I'm going to hand you up to Mark States Exhibit 99. Does that appear to be the picture, a still photo of something taken out of your dash cam?
Yes.
And can you see the victim in this picture off to the side?
Yes.
Offered 99.
Any objection to 99?
No, I'm just what happened in 96, 97, and 98.
It's a good question. Deal with it.
Okay. We'll call it 99. No objection, Your Honor. Thank you.
Submitted?
Now, when this picture was taken, was the car parked at that point, stopped?
I believe so.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks. Okay, could you tell us what we're looking at there?
Well, the building that's off behind the person that's crouched over, the injured person, that's the Otto Miller Auditorium.
Okay, to the left of the photo?
Yes, on the left side of that building.
Right.
So when we first pulled up, I could see that person lying there that's injured, and then I saw that person in uniform kind of over top of him.
Okay.
Is he up close again?
Oh.
Okay, I'm sorry. Does that help to look at it? It's blurry. I know the dash cam is not the most high
Right.
quality, but I'm pointing to the far left of the photo. Is this the person prone on the sidewalk you were talking about?
Yes, that was the injured person. I thought
And
they were
this is
injured. I couldn't tell if it was a medic or if it was a security officer.
somebody helping him.
Right.
Okay. Can you take a quick look at that picture again and just tell us if it appears that the person laying there is wearing shorts?
It does appear they're wearing shorts.
What did you do after you arrived?
I saw that once we parked. I got out of the vehicle, saw that, and then to the left of that person on the sidewalk is an entrance into the Otto Miller Auditorium. There were 2 or 3 people standing there, and they were waving their hands and yelling that there were more victims inside.
Okay, so did you go inside?
I did.
What did you see?
As soon as I went in through the doors, it's a double door. I went in through the first set of doors and the second set of doors. Directly on the right was a person lying face down on the ground. It appeared that they had blood on their face. There's also 2 males like on top of the person. I couldn't tell if they were trying to render aid or they were holding the person down.
Did you eventually learn that that wasn't blood?
Yes, I did.
And what was it?
It's oleoresin capsicum, or OC spray. It's like
Pepper
pepper
spray?
spray. Yes.
Okay, so they were holding him down. What did you do?
First thing I asked them was the person injured. They said, no, this is the shooter. So Officer Bed was with me. And I said, this is the suspect. I told the male to put his arms out like an airplane.
And what did he do?
He put his arms out like an airplane. And at that point, I controlled his left arm, while Officer Bed controlled his right arm. And then we, together, simultaneously put his hands behind his back and then handcuffed him with Officer Bed's handcuffs.
Did he resist at all?
No, he did not.
Did he appear to understand the commands you were giving him?
Yes.
All right, what did you do then?
Then I basically sat on top of him. I put my left knee across his left shoulder. My right knee was on the ground, and I just kind of held him there. And I tried to get out on the radio, let him know that we had the suspect in custody, but the radio didn't work. I don't know if it was because of the building or the location we were at. It wouldn't transmit.
So what'd you do?
So Officer Abed stepped outside of the building to transmit and let people know that we had at least one suspect in custody.
Did you ask anything of this man?
I did. I asked him if he had any weapons on him. He said he did not. All he had was a shotgun. Then I asked him if he was by himself or if there was another shooter. He said he was by himself.
Did you talk to him anymore?
Not that I can recall. No, I Mirandized him at one point.
Okay, what does that mean?
It means I read him his rights since he was in custody.
Did he acknowledge hearing the rights?
He did. Once I finished reading them to him, he did. He said he understood.
He said he understood.
Yes.
At some point, did he say something more to you?
At one point, he said that he wanted to die and that it was a compulsion.
Once you got him out to the truck, were you able to hear any of the conversation that Officer Abed was having with him?
When we were driving back to the headquarters building, yes.
Okay. And what did you hear him tell Officer Abed about his truck?
He said he had a white Chevy S10 that was parked outside of the Otto Miller Auditorium. It contained a journal, his journal, but no other weapons.
And did he continue to talk during the drive?
He did.
Okay. Just freely?
I believe Officer Bed was asking him some questions.
Okay. And he was responding appropriately?
Yes.
And what else did he say?
He said that he had psychosis, but he hadn't been taking his medicine recently. He wasn't sure if the incident that just occurred was a dream or if it was real, actually happened. He said that he had started to lose compassion for people approximately about a year ago. He also said that he had taken a tour of the SPU campus, even though he wasn't a student there, just so he could sort of plan the incident. He also talked about how he started working at Fred Meyer's about 3 weeks prior, and then he had to work later that day. He also mentioned that he used to work at a firearms range. He used to have a collection of weapons.
And when he said he wasn't sure if he was dreaming this or if it was real, did he appear to you to be aware of everything that was going on around him?
He did.
What happened once you got him to the headquarters building?
We pulled into the Sally Port, which is has garage door kind of cages. It's a secure area. We went up in the elevator to the 7th floor where the detectives are and where the interview rooms are. Then basically searched him, took everything out of his pockets, took his shoes off, unhandcuffed him, took him into a little bathroom so he could try to get some OC spray off of his face. We helped him wash his hands and wash his face. And then we just guided him into the interview room. The detectives interviewed him then.
Okay. I think just a moment. So, when you were kneeling on his, I think you said his knee and his arm, is that right?
No, basically my knee was going across his left shoulder. That's the best way I kind of describe it. And then my knee was on the ground alongside of him.
How long did you spend holding him until you were given the clear to take him away?
15 or 20 minutes at least.
Why did it take so long?
Because other officers had to come in. We had to clear the building, basically get everybody out and see if we could find other victims if there were other victims. And it just kind of took a long time to get all the officers there and then deploy them into the building and clear it. It takes a little while.
Thank you. Nothing else.
Cross-examination.
So, Officer Smith, you talked about the things that you heard Mr. Ybarra tell you in response to the questions.
Yes.
You documented all of that in your police report, did you not?
Yes, ma'am.
You wrote down that he said he had psychosis,
That's what he said, yes.
and you put that in your report?
Yes,
And you wrote down that he said he didn't know if this was real or a dream,
correct.
and you put that in your report?
Yes,
Because it's important to document the things that a suspect says.
correct.
And you're not going to be able to remember it later after you've done 100 other cases.
That's correct.
So you did that.
Yes, ma'am.
And you also talked for a minute about the pepper spray.
Yes.
You saw pepper spray in the area where Mr. Ybarra was.
I did. Oh, yeah. On him or on the floor and on his face, yes.
Okay, so you knew he'd been pepper sprayed.
Yes.
And when you were holding him, you were holding him face down on the floor?
Yes. His stomach was on the ground, yes. His face was against the floor, yes.
And he was in that position when you first came in, too, was he not?
He was, yes.
Okay. I just want to talk to you a little bit about the pepper spray. You have experience with pepper spray?
Yes, ma'am.
And how do you have experience with pepper spray?
I have been sprayed several times just in training. As being a police officer, I've been sprayed several times, and just the experience of having seen people be sprayed during my duties as a police officer.
And what does the pepper spray feel like to you when you've been sprayed?
It burns, and the best way I can describe it is it feels like ground glass in your eyes, and you're also, all the mucous membranes just leak.
Can you tell me the circumstances in terms of the physicality of how you've been pepper sprayed, like how close and how long, how many times in a row?
Just in training, it's usually they're 5 to 7 feet away. It's just a quick douse, usually across the eyes. Maybe 5 to 10 minutes at max is all we're exposed to, and we're able to wash it off with water.
You've talked with me before about the pepper spray, and my recollection is you described there being a oil-based pepper spray, and then is it
It's water. It's the other one.
water-based?
Yes, a
pepper spray?
water-based.
Okay.
Yes.
What's the difference between the two kinds of pepper spray?
The oil-based is oily. It's the particles of the oleoresin capsicum is suspended in an oil rather than like a water-based foam. The oil OC, the oil-based one is older, kind of, I guess, reiteration of it. It's just been around longer, but it tends to stay on the skin longer, and it's just in my experience, it's kind of harder to get off.
And did you have an opportunity to figure out what kind of pepper spray this was, oil-based versus water-based, that was used?
Just from observing it and knowing what each one looks like, it looked like it was oil-based to me.
And you actually wanted to get Mr. Ybarra decontaminated, did you not?
Yes, I did.
And you brought it up while you were inside Otto Miller Hall that he needed to be decontaminated.
Yes, that's correct.
But that didn't happen, correct?
That is correct.
It was too busy, too much going on there?
Right. The building hadn't been cleared yet, so I don't think fire would have come in to decontaminate him right then.
And then when you brought him outside to your police car, you actually mentioned it to your partner, who is now Detective Abed and then was Officer Abed, right?
That is correct.
And unfortunately, you weren't able to decontaminate him before you took him on the ride to the police department either.
That's correct.
So the whole time that you were in Otto Miller Hall and the whole ride to the police station, he had not had an opportunity to be decontaminated from the pepper spray?
That is correct.
Thank you. No further questions.
Officer, what does decontamination entail?
Basically, just taking water and flushing the eyes, and trying to get all that stuff out of it. And then basically the best way, then you just let the air out. That's the best course of treatment.
Thank you. Nothing else.
Nothing further.
All right, thank you. You're excused. Would you stand as judge for a minute?
state call Cheryl Michael.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth? Please be seated.
Good morning.
Morning.
Ms. Michaels, can you tell the jury your name and spell it for the court reporter?
My name is Cheryl Michaels, CHERYL-MICHAELS.
Ms. Michaels, how are you employed?
I'm Associate Director of Safety and Security at Seattle Pacific University.
How long have you held that position?
I've been there 16 years.
Tell us what is a little bit about your job responsibilities.
As Associate Director, I report to the Director of Safety and Security, Mark Reed. We oversee a security operations center that operates 24/7 on campus, private security. We employ 2 dispatchers and approximately 9 to 10 security officers and 1 special investigations officer, which reports directly to me.
When you say you have 9 to 10 security officers, are you have 9 to 10 on duty at all times?
No. Because we're 24/7, our officers will typically be 2 on a shift, and that will run 3 shifts, 7 days a week.
How big is the campus?
Campus is approximately, I think it's about 45 acres, and it's on the north side of Queen Anne Hill, and butts up to the canal at the gym and the Otto Miller Hall building.
Do you happen to know how many buildings you all have on campus and what you guys are in charge of providing security for?
There's academic buildings, office buildings, and residence spaces, which are both residence halls and apartment buildings and some campus housing. So I don't know what the total number is. It's, I want to say about, I think we have 43 housing facilities and probably another 10 to 15 academic buildings.
You talked about you have your own dispatch.
Yes, we do.
So that's like 911 calls, right?
It is. It's like operates like a 911 center. So we receive phone calls both for services and emergency calls. The security operations, we focus on 4 areas of response, and that's medical response, criminal incident response, fire response, and disasters, so like FEMA. So those calls come into our office, whether it's for a service call to assist somebody getting into a building, or it is in response to some incident that's occurred in one of those other areas.
So is there a phone number like all the
Yeah,
students
we have a emergency line that's 206-281-2911, and we encourage our faculty, staff, and students to contact us in an emergency so that we can respond to the incident with our security officers and also call 911. It's always our operational protocol that when we receive a call in any of those emergency areas, that we also call immediately to 911. We know all of the campus addresses on building, all the campus addresses for all the buildings on campus. So when a call comes into us, we know exactly how to relay that information to 911 to get them directly to the building or location on campus where the incident has occurred.
rather than just saying I'm at SPU?
Right, yeah.
Okay. We've heard a little bit about it. You don't have to go into great detail, but are the buildings open, or we've heard some about key cards and some about buildings where people are free to come and go?
The majority of buildings on campus are on card access control. During the June shooting, the card access would close the buildings down after hours, so a key card would allow people to access the building after hours. During business hours, most academic and office buildings are open.
And then we've heard a little bit about lockdown. Is that something where it's actually all the buildings are locked down, or is that the name of a procedure by which people are supposed to kind of hunker down?
It's a little
at
of
night?
both, actually. So the card access control and physical key locks are on all perimeter doors on campus of all major buildings. So maybe an apartment building may not have card access, but it will have key lock. And then within an interior of a building, say an academic space, a room that is smaller than 50 will have a push button lock, like a hard lock set. And in larger rooms where you have to have it crash bars, you know, when you're in like in this room, you know, you may have to have a crash bar to leave. Those are on card access, so they're electronically locked down. So all of those are managed through a software system out of our office. We have the big red button, if you will, that we can push and lock all of the buildings down instantly like that are on the card access control. And then we also have a software system that allows us to manipulate and all of the doors and lock them down as an alternative means.
There's somebody's already
So-
inside.
Yes, so that's the physical lockdown of the campus, but we also have the procedure of going into lockdown. So my office also manages emergency notifications out to the campus. And we practice this protocol for all the years that I have been there. When we go into lockdown, it is because we in security have heard or determined through on view or report that there is some determined threat to the campus or an individual on campus. If it's, we've practiced for active shooter, we've practiced for bank robberies, we've practiced for robberies in the area, or SPD contacting us to tell us that maybe there's a person with a gun in the area. So when we receive notification like that, we will immediately go into several steps. We will take physical action to lock down the campus. We'll push the red button, and we will begin a mass notification system out to the campus. So that is done through a software program that sends text messages, emails, and phone calls. It also would activate reader boards. So in classrooms, professors don't like the cell phones turned on. They want them turned off. But when that's your only means of communicating that there is a danger imminent or that you need to take some type of action, then it kind of inhibits the contact or the communication. So we've installed electronic reader boards in all of the classroom spaces and many large public spaces. These reader boards are basically like clocks, but when we activate them with an emergency notification, it'll beep and it'll scroll the message that communicates to the students, faculty, and staff what actions to take. So we'll activate the reader boards, we will put the campus in lockdown, we'll send out this mass notification, and we'll begin collecting as much information about the situation. We'll notify our security officers both over the radio, and we have an intercom system within our office where we also notify, we have a two-story office space, so we use an intercom as well to notify anybody who's working downstairs as well as upstairs that there's an all-hands type of response needed.
Can Ms. Huck just slow down a little bit?
Sorry.
Gather right down everything you have to say. Tell us a little bit about the surveillance system on campus.
We have a significant number of surveillance cameras on campus that are placed in strategic locations and then are monitored in the Safety and Security Operations Center by one of the dispatchers who will be there 24/7.
So you have like a bank of videos showing
We do.
what's going on?
So we have an operations center. It looks a little bit like on TV with CSI, where it's a bank of television monitors. There's two main ones and then three on each side, smaller monitors, where we manage and monitor all of the video surveillance. So we have real-time access as well as recorded playback.
Is there cameras in every building and every hallway on campus, or
There's
generally?
there's an extensive amount of cameras on campus. We cover main access points, street thoroughfares, some classroom spaces. A lot of them are placed, they're just strategic on what type of activity we might need to monitor in that space. So something like a computer lab might have a camera in the computer lab because we're monitoring the equipment as well as activities during class time.
Were you on campus on June 5th of 2014?
Yes, I was.
Tell me sort of your involvement or how you came to know the situation and what your role was.
So I just walked out of my director's office for a meeting and was walking towards the dispatch center, which is all of maybe 20 feet, when I heard my dispatcher announce over the radio and the intercom system, so we heard this announce, that shots have been fired at Otto Miller Hall, and all units were needed to respond. All units that day being officers Gus Carbajal and Clint Brummett. So based on our practice, I immediately ran into the dispatch center to provide assistance and to begin activating all of our notification systems. My special investigations officer and I almost collided as we were running to hit the red button. That's our first protocol after officers have been dispatched, is to lock the campus down and then begin the mass notification system that goes out. So once we had activated all of the notification systems and officers were rating on their communications that they were arriving, they were saw an individual down, they were proceeding to provide CPR. The rest of my staff and I were trying to then pull up surveillance video, answering 911 calls because we'd started receiving more calls coming in from people in Otto Miller Hall about what they were seeing, observing. And after some period of time, a lieutenant from the West Precinct showed up in our office and we began sharing communication because the officers at Otto Miller Hall were running into communication difficulties with the radios. So we were relaying intelligence as it came into us about what we were seeing, what we were reviewing on playback. It was very chaotic. We knew that someone had been injured outside because our security officers had told us. And one of the calls that came from Otto Miller Hall, Dr. Bolding, was telling us about how an individual had been shot. And so we're expecting a lot of injuries. We don't know where the person who was shooting at the students was at that time. We knew that the first shot had been fired outside, and we didn't have any information that early on to know. I should add also in that chaos moment, one of my special investigations officer also called 911 to give the exact address to Otto Miller Hall to dispatch, 911 dispatch, so officers knew exactly what building they were responding to.
Okay, let me stop for a minute. So you said
Yeah.
a lieutenant from West Precinct, and you're
Yes.
talking about the Seattle Police Department.
Yes.
And then you said the officers were having problems with their communication. Again, you mean the Seattle Police
Yes, I
Department?
do.
Okay, so you're helping relay information from your security officers to SPD.
Yes.
And like the calls that you're getting on your internal 911 or 291, you're giving that information to Seattle Police Department as
Yes.
well. Okay. And at the same time, kind of trying to watch the video and look at the screen. Is that
Yes.
fair? What's
Yes.
kind of generally what's going on? We've heard a lot of testimony about people thinking there's a second shooter. Do you know from being involved in that why that information
Yes.
was out there? Tell us what that
I'm
was
going
all
to just ask you to wait to respond until after she finishes your question. Otherwise, you can't.
We both talk fast and we can't both talk at the same time.
Understood.
Okay.
So in that moment, part of our response planning is to determine if there's more than one shooter, never assuming that there might be one. And also, we knew that one person had been shot outside, and yet we were getting calls about people on the inside. So the calls we were getting were describing different people in different clothing as the suspect. One call came in that described the defendant in a black hoodie and a white T-shirt holding a shotgun. Another call came in and described John Meese in shorts holding a handgun. They didn't know it was John Meese at the time. It was John Meese's description. When the lieutenant came, he shared with us that 911's descriptions that they had received had been of an individual outside Otto Miller Hall in a plaid shirt. Later, we determined that to be Thomas Fowler. So we had that information coming in to us, multiple descriptions of different suspects possibly holding different types of weapons. When my security officers entered the building and found Sarah, they had radioed to us that they had found an injured person, and it was halfway down a hallway in Otto Miller Hall on the north side, a very long building. So this individual was halfway down the building. And then shortly, 30 seconds, a minute after that, we get another another radio communication from Officer Carbajal that he had met up with a third injured person at the very back of the building in the mechanical room. So we have multiple possible suspects, and now we're hearing that there are victims spread out across the building, and yet we'd only been told that one suspect had been in the lobby. So we couldn't assume at that point that maybe there wasn't somebody else accompanying that person in the building or had access to a different location. So we spent a great deal of time trying to process all of this information to make it make sense to us.
And so you guys have the video of the shooting, is that correct?
Yes, we do.
And video from other cameras in Otto Miller Hall, is that correct?
Yes.
Filling in the sequence here. 6.
Thank you.
96.
Ms. Michaels, I'm going to show you what's been marked for identification. It states Exhibit 96. Do you recognize what that diagram is?
I do. That's the first floor of Otto Miller Hall.
Okay. And is this, we've had a lot of handwritten drawings, but is this actually the layout of the building
Yes, it is.
provided by SPU? Fairly
Yes, it is.
Yeah, fairly and accurately represents at least the general layout of Otto Miller Hall.
Yes, it does.
I'm going to state move to admit 96.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
To admit it? No.
With the court's permission, may the witness step down and kind of show the jury what we're looking at?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Michaels, it's very busy. Easier to read close up than far away, is that fair to say?
Can you change position?
Yes. Sorry, we want to make sure we can hear you. So just can you, a couple things I want to do as we're going through, for right now, can you just orient the jury to what we're looking at here? And then as we watch through some of the videos, will you be able to tell us sort of what part of the building the video is showing? Okay, great. So you got to make sure that everybody can see and hear
Right.
you.
So this is the west side of the building, and the entrance is here. There's a street, so sidewalk, street, sidewalk, Rome Pavilion, it's a gymnasium just directly across the street. Outside here on the north side is a parking lot. This is a parking lot, and Nickerson Street runs along here. And then these are other buildings that run into, they're not owned by SBU.
So starting with the lobby, do you see the little security desk monitor room that John Meese was in?
So this is the vestibule, and then this room right here is a glass enclosed office space where the security monitor would sit.
Okay, and this horseshoe here, does that represent the stairway to
Yes,
the
it does.
first and second floor? And what about the machine shop?
So the machine shop is here, so roll-up door access. Outside the machine shop, there's a entrance to the outside through double glass doors.
And then, so this would be the north hallway, and this would be the south hallway, is that correct?
Yes.
And all these are chairs, student
Yes.
chairs? Is that what that is? Making that very busy? Okay, great. Why don't you go ahead and have a seat?
All right?
Berlin, are you about to show the videos now?
Yeah,
Does
yes.
it make more sense? None of the videos are the length of time we have left. Does it make more sense to break early and start early?
Yes, it would be easier to mark it and admit it that way as well, Your Honor.
All right. Why don't we take our break now, and I'm going to ask you to be back by about 1:15, so we can get started about 1:20 or so we can continue with the testimony of this witness and the video evidence. All right? So if you leave your notebooks in the chairs, and you can sit.